Welcome to week 4. We get through the third wave part of the season. We had some good games here this past week. There was some really good games across the state as well. But looking at the NUIC, I mean, we got exactly what we thought. A lot of parity. Obviously, the North has quite a few more wins right now currently than the South, but that is due in part to the crossover games where the North leads that series 9 games to 6 currently. Obviously, as we move through the latter half of the season, that's going to change a little bit as we get going there. Big games, though. Our game of the week was huge with EPC and West Carroll. Obviously, not a lot of scoring going on in that game. EPC pulling that one out 8-0 to improve themselves to 1-2 on the season. The other big one was Dakota's win over Du-Pec. Dakota also improves to 1-2 with a 28-20 win over the Rivermen. And then Orangeville and Galena on Saturday, where Orangeville snuck out a 9-0 win in a defensive battle there. Pretty interesting stuff. The rest of the games pretty much went the way we thought they would. Taking a look around the state, obviously big games there. Some notable scores that we had was Milledgeville Central A&M's big win over Tuscola 49-14. Tuscola came into that game ranked number 3, Central A&M at number 4. Tuscola still has St. Teresa coming up this upcoming week, whereas Central A&M has St. T coming up in week 5. So some big games going forward there. Chicago Hope had a big win over Woodstock 41-14. Aurora Christian wasn't a big surprise as they beat Aurora Central Catholic 66-7. And then Arcola beat Villa Grove 41-6, just to give you a few. And then Athens' 52-0 win over Porta. So that gives you a look at what we feel the top teams in Class 1A did. On the other side of things, in Class 2A, GCMS won their 31 straight games, beating Hayworth 34-7. Big game coming up this week in week 4 as they play Fieldcrest. They just played Hayworth. They play Fieldcrest this upcoming week, and Fieldcrest beat Tremont 42-7. So big game there in the heart of Illinois Conference. I think GCMS is going to be favored, but obviously a big game for state-ranked teams. Be a lot of fun. Another good one is going to be Maroa Forsyth. They beat Pittsfield 42-8. They're getting ready to take on Williamsville, who's ranked number 1 in Class 3A. So a big game there. And this one kind of shocked me a little bit, but Sterling Newman pulled out a 1-point win over Kewanee, 27-26. And then Clifton Central beat Westville 35-13. And as mentioned, St. Teresa beating Macon Meridian 56-7. As mentioned, they have Tuscola this week, Central A&M the following week. So a lot's going to be determined in the Central Illinois Conference in the next 2 weeks. So it's a lot of exciting things to look forward to as we move forward here. Our crossover game this week takes us to Conley Field in Freeport, where the Aquin Bulldogs are going to play host to East Dubuque. East Dubuque comes in with a 2-1 record after they lost to Lena Winslow 48-12. And Aquin comes in still undefeated 3-0 after they beat Milledgeville 42-14. The last time these two teams met was back in 2014 in week 4, where Aquin won 35-28. And looking ahead at this game here, I think some things are going to be in favor of the Bulldogs here. But East Dubuque's done some really good things to get off to the start that they have to get to 2-1. They're right where we thought that they needed to be in order to have that shot to make the playoffs. They beat AFC, they beat Milledgeville, they lost to Lena Winslow. Granted, Lena Winslow did get a running clock in that game, but you know, you look at East Dubuque moving forward, they got this game with Aquin. Then they have Orangeville, Dakota, Du-Pec, Stockton, and Galena. So the rest of their schedule those are all games that East Dubuque can play in. And, I mean, you could take a look at any one of those games and toss it up. I think the Bulldogs are going to have a very good grasp on this game. I think they'll have the line edge. They'll have the edge at the quarterback position. You know, wide receiver, running back wise, I think it's going to be an even match there. I do like East Dubuque's line. They're doing some good things. Like we stated before, they have some good size. I really like Alex Anger in that position. Big kid, has a lot of size to him. Good football player altogether. They just have to be able to get things moving to allow Aquin to keep their offense on the sidelines, because Aquin's more of a quick strike type offense, whereas East Dubuque's they can hit you quickly, but they're probably more of chewing up the clock type, where they're just looking to get the small gains and move themselves down the field. Aquin's looking for the big play. They don't play like they're looking for the big play, but they tend to get that big play more so than anything.
And from what we've seen in week 2, I mean, Aquin, when their foot's on the gas, the foot's on the gas. So if East Dubuque can chew up the clock and slow that down, they could have the edge.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this game, East Dubuque's definitely got to chew up clock in order to keep themselves in the game. You give Aquin too many opportunities to be on the field offensively, you're going to be in a world of hurt. However, that could also play into a high-scoring game if Aquin scores quickly and East Dubuque can continue moving the ball and score quickly as well. You might have yourselves a shootout here. Obviously, it's a big game for East Dubuque as they want to climb to 3-1. Aquin's looking to get to 4-0. 4-0 gets them one step closer to that 5th win to qualify for the playoffs already in the season. And of course, Aquin's schedule is definitely loaded in the back half. As you take a look at their games coming up, they have EPC in week 6. They have Forreston in week 8 and West Carroll in week 9. So East Dubuque could come in here and put a little spoiler on the Bulldogs, but I like Aquin in this game.
I also like the Bulldogs.
We have Lena Winslow coming in with a 3-0 record, taking on Dakota as Dakota moved to 1-2 after they beat Du-Pec last week 28-20. And as we previously mentioned, East Dubuque Lena Winslow beat East Dubuque 48-12. Last year, Lena Winslow won this game 44-13 in week 9 and on their way to the semifinals. In the same token, Dakota made it to the quarterfinals last year. You wouldn't have thought it after this game here going into the playoffs, but yeah, it was a great opportunity for Dakota to see what it took to play a state championship caliber team. Granted, they had done that earlier in the year when they played Forreston. But this year, you know, Lena Winslow is just on a different mission this year.
Like you've said in the past, I mean, they're at another level. They are focused, and their sights are set on state.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk Lena Winslow Panther football and you talk Panther football across the state, you know, everybody's always asking, you know, how are they good year in and year out? And you just point at the coaching staff, the kids wanting to take that step to make sure they're not the ones that sells Lena Winslow short. They want to keep giving everything that they have. And granted, a lot of teams have that. But Lena Winslow just does it at a much higher level than what most teams can produce. And it's an incredible level considering the year-over-year success that they continue to have, especially looking back the last 10 seasons, back to 2009. Lena Winslow's only come up short from a quarterfinal run twice in the last 10 years. That's pretty amazing.
I feel like you don't even need to be telling me all this stuff. You and I talk Panther football quite a bit. You know, but you bring up a good point. Like, we have talked so frequently about the low numbers. And Lena, you know, who used to teeter on the 2A, I know one time we were 3A, like, they're still pulling out kids. kids want to play for Coach A. It's that simple. Like you said, the coaching staff, fantastic. I mean, weight room, like.
I mean,
it's just year after. I mean, I remember when I was in school, you went out for football.
Right. And like you said, numbers-wise, it's amazing that they're still getting the numbers to go out for football, considering the fact that their average enrollment right now is almost 100 students lower than what it was just 9 years ago. 9 years ago, in 2010, they had a 326 enrollment. They were the largest Class 1A team in the playoffs in 2010, the year they won their first state title. Last year, they had 228 kids. With the new enrollment factor this year, taking last year's enrollment and the previous year's enrollment and adding them together and dividing them out, they're at 232 this year. So it's not like they've had a lot of kids coming through, but they're still getting upwards to 50 kids going out for football. And as you stated, Coach A is getting those kids to buy into the system. They buy into the workouts. He has all of his coaches across every sport doing the exact same thing, and it just builds that mindset and mentality. This is where Lena Winslow football's at. And it's funny to think about that because that's once where Dakota football was at. And Lena Winslow was constantly chasing Dakota, and it wasn't until 2009 when they finally got the monkey off their back. And boy, as soon as they got by Dakota that year, that tide has turned for Lena Winslow. All they had to do was get over that hump, and boom, they were gone, and they've been that way ever since. It's the run that they've put on is impressive. You take a look at Lena Winslow prior to Coach Aaron being there, their success was okay. Coach Aaron has taken them to a whole nother level, and that level really came to rise 10 years ago, and it continues to keep going. And I mean, we talk about it the same way with Forreston too, but Lena Winslow, like you said, this is their year. They have to make it happen. Right here, rivalry week, Lena Winslow.
Lena Winslow.
A big game that is going to be renewing another rivalry is that of Stockton and Galena. As Stockton comes in this game 2-1, they're going to visit Galena, who comes in a game 0-3. Last week, Stockton beat AFC 40-6. Galena lost another heartbreaker, this time to Orangeville 9-0. Last time these two teams met, drum roll please, the 2015 first round playoffs, where Stockton pulled off the upset, 34-2. Ah, boy, 2015. Wow.
Oh, a long time ago, but
it was. It was and it wasn't. Unfortunately, it also coincides with what was the downfall of Galena. So that's where the irony comes into play here. And it came at the hands of Stockton. Obviously, looking at this game, Galena could take a look at their season so far and say, man, we could be sitting at 2-1. And rightfully so, they could be. In which, if they were sitting at 2-1, this game would be even more huge, with Stockton also being at 2-1. Galena's not. They're at 0-3. And unfortunately for Galena, they still have Lena Winslow on schedule in Week 8. Galena, in order to get back to the playoffs, must win every game moving forward. Because, I'm sorry, I don't like saying it, but it's true, I don't think they're going to win Week 8. So, in order for the Pirates to get to the playoffs, it's got to come now. Stockton, on the other hand, this is a great game for Stockton to get to 3-1. They, too, have to go through Lena Winslow yet, and then you still have Du-Pec, Orangeville, East Dubuque, and Dakota. All games that could go in any direction against or for Stockton.
No, minus week 5.
Right. I said outside of
Oh, sorry.
Yes. If you haven't noticed, I got Lena Winslow picked to go 9-0. This game's not about those guys. This game is about Galena and Stockton. But, Galena did some good things yesterday. I mean, they were moving the ball. The only problem was they weren't taking care of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, first drive right away, it got popped. Bauer was carrying it, and I don't remember if it was Kleckler or Rodeball, but they got it.
Right.
And I mean, Anderson had 3. Anderson was picked twice, or he had 1 interception,
1 fumble,
and 1. Well, he had 3 on the day.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, and then Montezuma had the 5th one, I believe.
So
I mean,
so I wonder if they were having some exchange issues. Either way, they got to clean it up, obviously. And had they had it cleaned up, you really take a look at statistics for Orangeville and Galena, they're relatively even. I mean, that was a very hard defensive battle.
Yeah. I don't, that's not even a question. Do you happen to have what their stats were, the totals for the day?
I don't know. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think Orangeville had 100.
It was like 198, 150 something.
Yeah.
I mean, it was fairly close, but like you said, I mean, it was a defensive battle through and through.
Yeah.
I mean, on paper it looked like a slow game, but I mean, it was relatively fast paced and.
Yeah, the game went by very quick because, there wasn't a lot of scoring. It was a lot of 3 and outs, a lot of running the ball, clock getting chewed up, stuff like that. Stockton's going to do the same things. I mean, they're going to come at you, and they're going to run. They're going to come at you with 3, 4 different running backs, which is exactly what they're built for this year. You have Hunter Hilly, Tyler Barch, Andrew Haas, and oh gosh, I'm spacing out right now. Anyway, they have good running backs and plenty of options to move the ball downfield. And then, like we said before, you got Garrett Buskey that can throw the ball too. I like the Blackhawks in this game, though.
I agree.
Moving over into the South Division, we kick off with Forreston traveling to Franklin Grove, where they'll take on AFC. Forreston comes in with a 3-0 record, where AFC comes in with an 0-3 record. And last week, Forreston beat Amboy 40-7. AFC lost to Stockton 40-6. The last time these two teams met,
do you want another drum roll?
Was back in the old Upstate Illini Conference in 1998 in Week 1, where Forreston won 62-0. So it's been quite a while since these two teams have played. In fact, ever since AFC left the Upstate Illini Conference for the Four Rivers and then came back into the NUIC, these two teams have not faced each other. Pretty amazing. Had AFC stayed in the NUIC instead of going to the Four Rivers, they would have been in the same conference for the first 5 years that the NUIC was in existence. That did not happen. This game, though, there's a lot that you could talk about, but it just isn't going in the right directions for AFC so far this season. Obviously, a big loss to Stockton. They were shut out by East Dubuque. They had a big loss to Orangeville. They have not gotten off on the right foot that they thought that they would. So now you're playing the number 1 ranked team in state. And Forreston right now is playing pretty good football. I mean, outside of their Week 1 debacle that they faced some adversity with 4 turnovers, they've been able to benefit from the fact that they really haven't had as tough of a schedule to slate outside of that Week 1 win over Dakota. And they really don't have a whole lot coming up until Week 6 when they play West Carroll. And then Lena Winslow is the big one in Week 7 that has the entire state looking at that game. This week, though, this one's going to be Forreston. There's just not much to say there. Another rivalry game takes us to EPC, where Milledgeville will come to town. These two teams last met in 2006, where EPC won 28-6. This is an old Upstate Illini, original NUIC South type rivalry game. Milledgeville comes in this game with an 0-3 record, though EPC comes in with a 1-2 record. Last week, Milledgeville lost to Aquin 42-14, where EPC beat West Carroll 8-0. You take a look at some of the things that Milledgeville has going on. They don't have a lot of size this year compared to what they were last year. They have a lot of team speed, but they just have not had a lot of things to build upon. I mean, they had their loss to Stockton. They had a very close loss to East Dubuque, and then they just got, clocked by Aquin. Aquin was up 42-0 early in the third quarter to get the clock rolling, and then Milledgeville ended up scoring there in the third or fourth quarter, or third and fourth quarters. Can't remember exactly, but they scored after Aquin pulled out the starters, and they just have not gotten off to the start that people thought that they could get off to. Now they take on EPC. Granted, EPC is a little bit down from what they have been over the last few years, but this is going to be a pretty tough game for the Missiles. I think EPC is definitely going to have the edge on the line, and unfortunately in football, especially in the NUIC, you rely a lot on the line to determine where you're going to go. EPC has a very strong line. They've had some growing pains to get through. Obviously, they persevered in a tough game with West Carroll. One of those games where, West Carroll beat Dakota, who just beat Du-Pec, who had beat EPC the week before. See the circle?
That's been the story of this year, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, and it's great. I mean, it just shows, it goes back to the whole parity. They're outside of Forreston and Galena, which everybody knows are up here. Everybody else has a good level of parity, and it's not bad. It's great for the conference, honestly. The only downside is you are going to probably see some teams that will miss the playoffs that could probably and most likely beat teams across other conferences had they made the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the parity gets you. It becomes really tough. I mean, I remember a time when Warren and River Ridge were still a co-op, and they were 0-9, but they were the toughest 0-9 team in the state that year. And, I mean, they beat a Dakota, or they did not beat a Dakota, they were 0-9. They lost to a Dakota team in overtime that went to the playoffs. They lost to an Orangeville team by a field goal that went to the playoffs. That's what we have here. We have a lot of teams that can play with each other, and granted, back then, Galena was the power then, so you still always have that power team.
Mm-hmm.
We have two of them. Everybody else, it's a dogfight. This game, EPC's trying to build up. They have a great shot to get to the playoffs, even despite their start, but they still have to play Dakota, Aquin, and Forreston that are going to be sitting there in the playoffs. Most likely. Dakota is also on the bubble of that as well. But, those are big games for EPC. Milledgeville is not going to match the line play, and that's where I got the Wildcats.
Taking them as well.
Our last South meeting takes us to Amboy, where they're going to play host to West Carroll. West Carroll comes in with a 2-1 record. Amboy comes in at 0-3. Last week, West Carroll lost to EPC 8-0, as we just got done mentioning that game. And Amboy lost to Forreston 40-7. Last year, this game was played in week 3, where Amboy won 28-26. Here again, you take a look at a few things. West Carroll was one of those teams where I thought at the beginning of the year that they could be a playoff quality team, but through the first 3 weeks, I had a feeling that, they might come in to here at 1-2. They're 2-1. So they're sitting really good still. And they have a good chance to get to 3-1 against Amboy. The only thing is that in the 3 years that they've played Amboy, Amboy's beat them 2 of the 3 years. And it almost goes every other year. So I guess that means this is the year the Thunder should return the favor. Which very well could be possible. Amboy lost quite a bit of some very skilled talent last year. They have a few players that are still very much skilled this year. They're just in our team that isn't getting it all put together yet. West Carroll is playing really well. Obviously, they had opportunities against EPC that they just could not convert. And with that, they lost the game. Otherwise, they could be sitting at 3-0. We're talking about them possibly going to 4-0. Amboy's losses were Du-Pec, Lena Winslow, and Forreston. All games that, outside of Du-Pec, that was a big loss, mind-blowing loss. How much that they fell off from where they were against Du-Pec the year before. Obviously, Lena Winslow and Forreston were games that you could pencil those in and chalk them up as losses because Amboy has a very heavy schedule, and it doesn't get much easier as they have West Carroll coming to town now. Next week, they go to Aquin. After that, you have Galena, and then you host EPC, and then Milledgeville and AFC. The sunset looks a little bleak right now for the Clippers. I think West Carroll has a great shot. Amboy, AFC. Then they have Forreston in week 6, Milledgeville, Du-Pec, and Aquin. You get to 3-1 here, possibly 4-1 in week 5. You're 5-2 coming out of week 7 potentially. And then you got Du-Pec and Aquin weeks 8 and 9. That definitely gives West Carroll those opportunities to take a look, see what they can build upon, keep improving, maybe pull off an upset of a Forreston and surprise them, or maybe get on top of Aquin in week 9, which is very much possible because I think all those matchups could be really, really interesting, especially when you start spreading Forreston out. Spread Forreston out. They play a base defense. Base defenses are easy to beat. What makes it hard to beat Forreston's base defense is that they're super fast. West Carroll has a lot of team speed, though. They just got to get everything going, put together. This week, I like the Thunder.
I also like the Thunder.
Our game of the week takes us to Pecatonica, where Orangeville comes in at 2-1, and they're going to travel to Du-Pec to play the Rivermen, who also come in at 2-1. Last week, Orangeville beat Galena 9-0, and Du-Pec lost 28-20 to Dakota. This is the first ever meeting for these two teams, and it's a great opportunity to really see what both teams bring to the table.
It sure does. I know we've talked. We've got a lot of questions for both teams. Who are they? This will really help put the pieces together. Like we talked earlier, you've got so-and-so beating so-and-so, but they beat them. So this is really, I feel like, going to tell us a lot about both teams coming in.
Oh, definitely. You got to take a look at Orangeville. Obviously, they've been relying heavily on Garrett Rodabaugh and Carter Kleckler. They've been having some issues with the passing game right now due to a couple injuries. They've kind of had to show their hand a little bit, but they're grinding through. They're getting things done. If you know Coach Doyle, he doesn't make excuses. He just, hey, this is what we have to do. This is where we need to go. Du-Pec, same way. Coach Hoffman is very well aware of what he has in his team. He knows that he has a lot of things that need to be shored up in order for Du-Pec to continue to see success moving down the road. He also understands that they can't just be all pass. They have to be able to mix that run game in there.
You have to be the multidimensional.
To offset the passing game, because if all you can do is pass, any chance you run and you're not getting yardage, then all of a sudden you see 7 people dropping back and you're just relying on a pass rush. Granted, you give a kid like Hunter Hoffman all day to pass, for a sophomore, that kid is on the money all the time. I mean, that's one takeaway that really impressed me, is he is on the money. Now, if you're Orangeville, you want to get pressure on Hoffman. Because of his youth, he still makes some decisions that you would expect a sophomore to make. And, you know, one of those is when he's rushed out of the pocket, it's hard for him to find receivers downfield. Granted, you know, the kid studies a lot of film. He can identify a lot of different scenarios that you throw at him. But as a defensive coordinator, I want to continue throwing many different looks at him to try to get him off his game as much as possible. Orangeville, they're going to come at you and they want to punch you in the mouth like typical NUIC football. But they also are trying to get pass games going. Jake Doyle, so this is funny. We have a battle of coaches' kids at quarterback for this game, but Jake Doyle has done a decent job running the Orangeville offense. Obviously, he too, being a younger guy, he's a junior this year, first-year starter. He's got some things he needs to work on as well as far as progression, things like that. But both these guys, I shouldn't just call them kids, are good quarterbacks that can handle their offenses. And obviously both coaches know that they still have lots of room for improvement to make things move forward. One thing that I see an advantage for Orangeville is Du-Pec had trouble stopping the run with Dakota last week. You take a look at the numbers. Last week against Dakota, you know, Du-Pec had the ball for 19 minutes and 27 seconds, where Dakota had the ball for 28 minutes and 33 seconds. But you take a look at the second half when Dakota really started to pound the ball at the Rivermen, and Du-Pec only had the ball for just under 9 minutes compared to Dakota owning the clock at 15 minutes in the second half. And granted, the scores, if you take a look at the scores, Dakota outscored the Rivermen, what was it? It was 22 to 13 in the second half, bringing the final score 28 to 20. But 22 to 13, that's 9 points. That's a 2-score difference in the ball game, and you know, really Dakota was up 28 to 13 with 3 minutes left in the game. And a lot of it's because Free changed up his offense and ran 3 plays and said, try to stop us. That's exactly what Orangeville needs to do. They're not going to be able to just do it with Rotoball, though.
You're going
to have to utilize Kleckler.
Yeah.
And if you can find somebody else, I know that Jordan's out right now. Hopefully he comes back. Who knows when that return is going to be. It could be as early as this week, but it may not be yet. If they can utilize Carson Road a little bit, that would help. Dalton Lowe might be able to help. Just got to do some things to make sure that they're not keen on Rhodey 100% of the time. Likewise, on the Rivermen side of things, they are very much a quick strike offense. You take a look at Trey Stifter and Gabe Howard. I mean, you get those 2 guys out in open space, Hoffman's going to find them. And he's going to find them in a hurry. And then you throw in Grant McCullops in there as well, who can spring open either on the outside or coming across the middle at any given time. And then you add in Kelton Gann, you got 4 legit receiving targets, and then you still have Trenton Taylor running bubble routes outside of his running back position. And, sometimes that little bubble route, granted, we haven't seen it yet, but, Coach Hoffman, Coach Nolan, they might want to look at it. Instead of doing a little bubble route, get him to go on an outside like he's blocking and then just come right across the middle on an inside slant. That could open up some things too. And Du-Pec has that ability. I mean, we saw him go 5 wide. We saw him go 4 wide. We saw him go 3 wide, 2 back set in the backfield. They have so many different options to throw at you, and their offense is such a quick strike. The only downfall for the Rivermen right now is they have to be able to run the ball, because you cannot rely throwing the ball in this conference.
Not when it starts getting cold and rainy.
Well, not only that, but the coaches in this conference know how to stop passing teams because they are physical up front. And when you have a team that is physical up front, me personally as a defensive coordinator, I'm going with a 4-set down lineman rush, and I'm blitzing at least 1, if not 2 linebackers every time. That still leaves 5 people back to cover the pass. Granted, if they go 5 wide, you want to cover 6. So you got to be able to shift and move. But, Howard is such an amazing talent. Stifter's really growing a lot from going into the running back to the wide receiver role. And Hoffman can just sling that ball all over the place. This is going to be a great matchup. I don't know who to pick in this game.
Well, I'll go first. I'm going to take the Rivermen again.
You're taking Du-Pec, and man,
I know you've gone back and forth on
it. I have.
We've talked about it several times already today.
All day. You know what? I'll go with the Rivermen too. They're at home. It's homecoming. Provided they can get a run defense, the Rivermen. All right, that takes us into our bench warmers player of the week for week 3. Had some good games, obviously, like we had mentioned already throughout this broadcast. And the 2 biggest games were Du-Pec versus Dakota and EPC and West Carroll. And our winners came out of both of those games. So in the North, Josh Clark from Dakota is our player of the week recipient for the North side. He had 78 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception on defense, 9 tackles, and a sack. And in the South, Carson Klaus of EPC had 3 tackles, 2 big interceptions for the Wildcats. He had 3 punts for 86 yards that helped pin West Carroll deep, and then he also contributed 17 yards receiving. Both those guys were big for their teams and much needed big win opportunities for both Dakota and EPC respectively. So congratulations to you guys on your performances this week. And don't forget to stop into Bench Warmers. Thanks to Eric White. You'll be able to receive your free extra large pizza and wings as part of Bench Warmers being our sponsor for our Player of the Week this year. So we're going to move into our Power 5 for heading into Week 4. It's one of those questions where earlier in the day I was asked, would you expect the standings to be where they're at right now after 3 weeks when you were thinking about the season at the start of the season? And to be quite honest, there's some teams that are a little bit different. So obviously here's a graphic right now to show you exactly what I thought the standings would be after week 3. And, a little bit of changes, but some of the teams are exactly where we thought that they would be. Moving into our Power 5, obviously Lena Winslow still very much on top of the tier. They're 3-0. They get ready to host Dakota this week, who comes in with a 1-2 record. And Lena Winslow obviously on another level right now. And then at number 2 is Forreston. They too 3-0, and they're getting ready to take a visit to AFC, who's 0-3. And really, you take a look at the past 4 or 5 seasons now. Forreston and Lee and Winslow have really been going back and forth, date back to 2013 even, where, they've, between the two of them, they won 5 of the last 6 state titles in Class 1A. So there's really not a lot to argue with between what these two teams have done. Coming at number 3 still is the Aquin Bulldogs, again at 3-0 right now. They're getting ready to host East Dubuque, who comes in with a 2-1 record. East Dubuque's one of those teams where, I predict them to be at 2-1 through the first 3 weeks. So we'll see if they can match Aquin's line play to come out in that game. Still at number 4, despite their loss, is Du-Pec. They're 2-1. Keeping them here basically because they have a high potent offense that can score rather quickly. Their loss to Dakota was not a bad loss by any stretch of the imagination. They get to play host to Orangeville this week, who's 2-1. Orangeville is going to be our 5th team in the Power 5 this week, so we'll just combine the two of them to talk about one game. But obviously this is going to be our game of the week. Big matchup for both teams, run versus pass. Who can win the line of scrimmage? Who can get off the ball? Who's going to control the clock? And it's going to be a lot of fun. And really looking forward to this matchup to see what both teams do, what changes they have to make in order for them to have success to get the W. But that gives you a look at our Power 5 and, our Benchwarmers Player of the Week. Obviously, Week 4 is right here. There's a lot of rivalry games this week. I don't think that the games will be what you would normally expect in a rivalry game. I just feel that you have a lot of parity, so there's going to be some surprises, but you also have some teams that are just a little bit step above, and you're going to expect that win to come. Our game of the week I'm really excited about, though. Orangeville at Du-Pec should be a lot of fun. Anyway, get out to the games Friday. Week 4 already here. It's amazing. It goes by so fast all the time. But support your teams. As always, root for the NUIC.